Good morning and welcome to Backchat. I'm Hugh Chiverton, your co-host today, Mike Rouse. Mike, good morning to you.
Good morning, Hugh.
On today's Backchat, the PLA in Hong Kong. There are signs that the role of the PLA here is changing, with troops turning up, for example, in country parks to help clear up after the typhoon, and talk of uniformed soldiers appearing on our streets. Last month also saw Chinese troops move to other Asian countries via Hong Kong, with giant military transport planes using Chat Lap Kok for the first time. At the same time, there's talk about the 19 military sites and 2,700 hectares of land which is given to the PLA, which would be very welcome for development in our land-starved city. There's still controversy over the PLA dock on the central waterfront, of course, and just how garrison law applies here. So what do you think of the way the PLA has behaved over the last 20 years? Is there room for a bit more freedom now? At least one recent poll suggests that a higher profile will be welcomed by the Hong Kong public. Do you think that land is properly used, or is it actually idle and a waste of space? Let us know your take. You can leave a message on our Facebook page, Backchat on RTHK Radio 3. You can email us, backchat@rthk.hk. Call us on 233-88266. After 9:20, we're talking about the Hong Kong Gay Pride Parade 2018, which was held on Saturday. Joining us for our first discussion, we have with us now Stephen Kwok, Chairman of the Labour Party, Lawrence Ma, a barrister, Chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation, and Peter Wong, an MPC delegate, and we hope James Tay will be able to join us at some point as well. Good morning to you all, gentlemen. Stephen Kwok, let's start with you, maybe. Thanks for joining us. What do you think about the way... Do you think there's room for a little bit more freedom for the PLA? Because they are more or less invisible at the moment in Hong Kong. Do you think that... and that was really, I guess, because of kind of sensitivities over the handover and so on. 20 years on, do you think things have changed a little bit?
Yes, I think Hong Kong people are afraid of that things happen, because after the June 4 incident, we all know that the handover of Hong Kong, because we know that there have one country and two systems, and the soldiers and the PLA in Hong Kong will be kept in low profile. Include they will not get as soldiers in the urban area or in the street in Hong Kong, but now they can become a volunteer, or they can even occupy some land set in Hong Kong side from Shenzhen. So that we think that it is the Hong Kong people will be scary about the high profile of PLA in Hong Kong.
What do you think they do all day, Stephen? I mean, they're supposed to be here to guard us against foreign invasion, but there's nobody invading Hong Kong, or there to support the police in event of civil disturbance, but our police force are perfectly capable of handling all the civil disturbance. So isn't there a limit to just how much basketball young men and women can play?
Yeah, we now all have the regulations about how the government can ask for help from PLA, but we see the tycoon, they help to clean up the in country park, but they have not noticed the government, and the government did not be informed.
Surely that you're talking about the procedures if the government calls out the garrison as a garrison to do something that's in its range of duties. That wasn't within its normal range of duties, was it? They weren't defending us against American wind. It was a wind from a storm. It was rain.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't being called out as a garrison. I think that's my question. They were just idle young men and women, and there was something for them to do. You think you're worried about that?
Yes, I worry about that. So that we think we should, according to the one country and two system, for the PLA in Hong Kong.
How about if they took part in Trail Walker and walked along the Macklehose Trail to raise money for charity? Will that be all right? I think the British used to take part in things like that. Do you think they should be allowed to walk around freely in Wan Chai?
No, I don't think so. But you know that there's a historical background in Hong Kong.
Well, historically in Hong Kong, the military were allowed to walk around.
Okay, well, let's go to Lawrence Ma now, barrister, chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation. Mr. Ma, good morning to you.
Good morning, Hugh.
Thanks immensely for joining us today. As I say, it's 20 years on since the handover, 21 years. Do you think that we should change our attitude towards the PLA? Do you think they should be given a bit more freedom?
It's not just from what our aspect, from our perspective of thinking about the matter. You also have to observe it from the angle from the PLA is themselves. Now, if you read the law carefully, and under the garrison law in Article 16, they have to observe social ethics and to pay attention to civilized and polite manners. That means if they come out in the public, they would have to be strictly abide by Article 16. Now, that's why we don't see them walking on our streets with their uniform on, because that is not something so far in Hong Kong being acceptable. Now, and they have to be severely disciplined if they were in their uniform outside, and there was a dispute or conflict happened between the soldier and a member of the Hong Kong public, because that would subject them to first military disciplinary action inside. It also possibly subject them to criminal prosecution outside if there is a wrong committed, if there is some criminal acts that they've done, they would be severely penalized. So they are very cautious as far as I've met some of them. I've spoken to some of them. They have been extremely cautious in coming out into the public, even in plain clothes, because if there is any dispute happen between them and a citizen of us, they would get themselves in a very serious trouble to get back inside.
Does the garrison law apply whether they are in uniform or out of uniform?
Yes. The garrison law applies to all the personnel, including units and organs inside the Hong Kong garrison, and it is a law applicable generally to Hong Kong. And the law actually provides for if there is a dispute when they are performing functions as the garrison in Hong Kong. If that happens, if they're performing functions as a garrison in Hong Kong, this is an act of stay, which means that takes them outside the jurisdiction of Hong Kong courts. But if there is a contractual dispute, for example, supplying of foodstuff, material to the garrison in Hong Kong for them to build their installations and build their camps, then if there's a contractual dispute, you've got to go to arbitration, and if that's not if there's no arbitration clause, you can go to the Court of Hong Kong. For personal members of the PLA, if they are not performing duties, if they're daily activities, for example, they come out of the street, and if they have committed a crime, say steal an item, then that would the crime would be prosecuted under Hong Kong law and would be under Hong Kong court's jurisdiction. But of course, there's a transfer clause which says that if the Hong Kong government, the law enforcement agency, the police and the like, comes to an agreement with the garrison to say that, this person can be transferred back to the military court in China for prosecution, then that would be fine. So if they are in a civil dispute, for example, if a soldier inside the camp was selling precious materials that they have from their hometown to a local Hong Kong citizen, and the Hong Kong citizen didn't pay, then that would be outside the performance or function of the garrison member, and that dispute would come under the jurisdiction of a Hong Kong court. And for disaster relief, which we are paying attention to, if they have, say for example, there were some civil wrongs committed during the disaster relief, they broke into the wrong flat to save a person, and then the person of the flat, owner of the flat, brings a civil action against the garrison in the performance of their duty. That would be also under the jurisdiction. That will not be under the jurisdiction of the Hong Kong court.
What about? Okay, thank you very much. What about the case of, say, the PLA soldiers who were helping to clear up after the typhoon? Does garrison law apply to their actions there because what they were doing was part of their duties or not, or what?
That would be under their duties because they come out here. They didn't come out as a volunteer by themselves, signing up to a subscription advertised by the Hong Kong government. They're coming out here because by order of the Central Command, upon request of the Hong Kong government, approved by the central government, and then they come out as in the performance of their duties. Now,
is that in fact the case? I mean, there were claims last week that there was no request from the Hong Kong government to Central Command.
Well, under the law, Mike, it has to be a request from the Hong Kong government.
Yeah, I mean that was the complaint. That was the complaint that someone was making, that there was no. And for me, this is sort of a few hundred bored young men putting their time and energy to something useful. I was severely criticised for taking that point of view at the meeting, but people are harping on and on about failure to follow the proper procedure. The garrison are not called out.
Yeah, you probably have to feed us with more information with respect to the service provided by the PLA troops last week.
No, it was a whole session organised by Emily Lau about is Hong Kong losing its freedom, and Ching Chong was very agitated about the garrison being called out by someone from the liaison office, not from the Hong Kong SAR government.
Well, under the law, that cannot be done.
Okay, well, Peter Wong, good morning to you.
Yes, good morning.
Hi, thanks for joining us once again. The garrison law does says that the garrison is there to do what you'd expect soldiers to do, to guard against and resist aggression, to guarantee the security of the SAR, to shoulder the responsibility of defence, take charge of military installations, and to undertake relevant foreign military affairs. Helping clearing up trees doesn't seem to fall. Well, it doesn't fall under that list of duties. What do you think about what they were doing?
I think, Russ, the issue brings up that there are some allegations about whether they follow the law, and I think Lawrence has given a very full explanation of that. If there is someone feel the complaint need to bring up to court, they should do it instead of just spreading the news. I mean, scaring people. Like I share with you the idea that if the people who's not living in the area when the last typhoon really blown all the trees up, it was so heavy. I mean, the debris on the roads for quite some time, and we see our Hong Kong government, various departments, people working very hard, and still there are a backlog of works. So we certainly welcome whoever it will be to lend a helping hand. I mean, to clear that. And I think if that raises complaint, I should bring the picture even broader. Now, the PLA's image all over the world, especially in the Chinese communities, wherever there's calamities, they are really welcome. And I think we've got to think of Hong Kong. Some of the allegations that really highly critical of the PLA is that I think it's not fair. And in that sense, number one, I think the garrison stationed in Hong Kong under the basic law, that is a reflection of the sovereignty of the state. So I think that their presence is undisputable national right. The other thing is that they actually are not invincible. They are actually low profile and play their role, not only according to the basic law, but at the same time, many of the social affairs, say for example, when there are visits of the fleets and also in many of the social service and weekends, and they invite the Hong Kong citizens and all communities to visit. And I think that center around the image of PLA, I think the PLA image is getting better and better each day. And in fact, I would like to tell you, Ross, that in the past few years, I've been trying very hard to get the central government to allow Hong Kong people the right to join the PLA. I think we should have our own. Our young people in particular, they should have also not only just an obligation, have the right to join forces that will really protect the country. So I think that we have 20 years now down the road, Hong Kong is a part of China. I think the right of joining the army, the frontline army, I think that Hong Kong, especially next generations, they should feel the responsibility the obligation as well. Especially if you look at the world today. Now, right in front of us, in the South China Sea, we are having some very tense international interference of sovereignty rights. And I think all of us in Hong Kong should, outside of the box of Hong Kong, I mean, including all our friends, I know.
Well, I tell you, Peter Wong, staying in the box for the moment. What about a deal? They've got all this land, a lot of which is frankly it's not being used. I know they claim it's not idle, but really it's not being used at all. Some of it's falling apart. Even some of the buildings are falling down and things like this. There's 2,700 hectares of that. We desperately need land. We could save ourselves $1 trillion. We give the PLA more freedom. They give us more land. How about that as a deal?
No, I think the assessment of using of the lands, that is something could be discussed, deliberated. I think prudently on that, and I think that both the central government would not be, unreasonable about that. Bringing it as a discussion topic, I think I welcome the idea. Relocations, and now with the bigger plan of the filling of the sea in the Lantau, certainly opens a lot of opportunities.
Of course,
I'm not against that,
They're only occupying the land that they inherited from the British forces, aren't they?
Well, that was the previous military consideration of the British, and why it comes to China is that the consideration need to be reviewed.
But I must say,
that is something maybe for them to consider.
Every week, when I come to the studio here, I drive past one site in particular, very high profile, which appears completely deserted, and would make an ideal residential
Osborne Barracks. You mean?
Well, yes.
You can name it. It's all right. They won't sue.
Something you have got to talk with the government, especially the town planning. If you build too many blocks there, the traffic and all the other amenities would have got to come into face, and that is the reason why. I mean, when this Lantau Island landfill comes up, there are so many different sorts of ideas. I think that is something needs deliberations, and in the end, there would be, I think, should be a scientific assessment. I mean, to get our town planning better.
But you wouldn't be against that, because last week we were also talking to the FTU and Alice Mack, I think it was, and she was saying, that's something that could be considered, is using the military land. So you agree, Peter?
Yeah, I think consideration is certainly. Now Hong Kong is an open society. We can talk, we can reason and deliberate out. If it is right, it's consensual, I think I would go along with that. The thing is that that is something, it affects, of course, our community. The quality of certainly needs the inputs from all sectors.
All right, let's see if we can maybe call you back as well. We've got a poorish line there with Peter Wong. Stephen Kwok from the Labour Party, what do you think about the idea of taking back some of the PLA land and using that for development? Mr. Kwok? Yeah, hello, Stephen Kwok. Okay, let's go. Put that to Lawrence Marr. What do you think about that? Do you think there's a deal to be struck there?
Yes. There is a specific provision in the garrison law which governs this situation. The lands are naturally military lands in the hand of the garrison because they were inherited, as you said, from the British force. And if there's a power or discretion to have it transferred back to the Hong Kong government if they are no longer in use. That is an obligation. There is also a freedom on the part of the Hong Kong government under Article 13 of the law to say that if the Hong Kong government needs, on the basis of needs, that if the Hong Kong government needs some of the land, the military land from the PLA, the Hong Kong government should apply to the central government for approval. And if that's done, if that's approved, the Hong Kong government has to provide a new lands and military installations to give them a replacement land for the garrisons to conduct their activities. So for example, if we need the expensive plot of land in near the Wan Chai Hong Kong Harbour area, we will have to replace it to the garrison.
But that presupposes that there is a military need for that facility or that piece of land, doesn't it? I mean, I can understand that was the old arrangement as well. If there was an urgent need for a particular piece of land, then you had to replace for the military the facility somewhere else. But if there's no need for it, if it's not being used, why not just give it back?
And then it says it should be transferred gratis to the government of the SAR.
But how they use it may not be apparent to naked eye, because you don't observe soldiers walking on that piece of land. Doesn't mean that there's no operations inside. So I mean, I can't speculate on whether it's being used now or it's really being abandoned.
Yeah,
I've been inside. I've been inside for ceremonies, and I've seen the building, some of the levels of the building. I've been inside the head office, the headquarters, and it has been established. It's been fabricated, and at least to the floor that I've been in, there's good renovation. I haven't been given access to other floors, but I believe that it is still operational.
There are, I mean, round Route Twisk and things, there are areas there where the buildings are really falling apart. I mean, they're completely abandoned.
I can't comment. I haven't been brought into to those areas.
I mean,
there's the range, the firing range. That's
the biggest, isn't it?
That's the biggest. That's how big is it? That's
1,200 or something.
1,200 acres.
I think the headquarters is really being operated as a headquarters, because I think the head of command and the other officers, the secretarial office and other officers are all stationed in the main building.
I don't think anyone's talking about what used to be called the Prince of Wales building. I mean, that clearly is the headquarters that they're using. It's some of the other sites around the place which are being neglected. You never see soldiers, you never see vehicles moving in and out. I think one of them is padlocked all the time. Is it time where we had to sit down with the garrison commander and said, look, what do you really need here to do your job?
I think the avenue is always open. I mean, if there is places, particularly in this pressing climate of housing needs, there's certainly that could be a discussion with respect to certain parcel of lands and whether that could be given back to the Hong Kong government for building housings.
I think when the government have been asked about this, they say this land is not idle, so therefore we're not going to use it. Presumably that's what the PLA line is. The line is that this land is not idle, so there you go.
You can't presuppose things. I mean, it is always we can't presume bad faith on the PLA. If there's a genuine need, they don't have much of a say, because it's really politics when it comes to land management and administration, instead of really genuine military. Instead of military use at all, because some of the lands, because after so many years, the war has gone onto very much electronic forms, and still do we need that many soldiers? I mean, Xi Jinping himself decided to cut 300,000 soldiers 1 or 2 years ago of the army. Now, so personnel and physical soldiers may not be so pressing, may not be a pressing need for the military. So in that case, if we don't have to house that many soldiers, can we scale down the size of the occupation?
How many have we got now in Hong Kong?
I have no idea, because that's a very military secret that we cannot be released. Of course, I mean, if you know how many soldiers in Hong Kong, a foreign power may when designing if there's an invasion or there's a conflict, how many forces would they deploy in the region?
They could certainly be reinforced quickly from Shenzhen, though, couldn't they? I mean, there's an hour?
Or less on the train.
No, I'm not suggesting they commandeer all the trains. Maybe after the news we could talk about them socialising, mixing with people in Hong Kong. I mean, how much do they earn a month? Do they earn enough to go to the bars in Wan Chai and Lan Kwai Fong? Or is it going to be 1 beer and 10 straws or something?
Well, as far as I came into some contact with some of them socially, I've been aware that they were not given that much time outside. They were only given some time, for example, a week or so in a year or two, to come out and do shoppings for them, for their families back in the mainland. But other than that, I don't think they would, go into, exorbitant activities locally.
I swear I did see some watching the Occupy. So there were
really?
People who really looked like PLA soldiers in plain clothes watching from
watching
and things.
Yeah.
Watching, yeah.
Not taking part.
Yeah.
No.
But you can't assume everybody looks, militarily comes from the garrison here, because that could also come from the liaison office.
Could be. Okay, well, we're going to return to that. We're going to take a break now for the news at 9 o'clock. Drop us a line with your thoughts. Backchat at rthk.hk. Also going to be talking later about the Gay Pride Parade on Saturday. The weather forecast before the news now. Sunny intervals forecast for today and a maximum temperature of about 25 degrees. That look mainly cloudy with a few rain patches in the middle of the week. 23 degrees now. Relative humidity is at 73%. And a reminder that tomorrow we will have our special election forum because of the West Kowloon by-election. Do join in. It'll be with Ada and myself at the usual time. And the usual program. So that's the special election forum tomorrow at this time.
Democracies and try to pit us against each other. And in this global order, which we have to take very seriously, our strength, our true strength, lies in unity.
Et notre unité.
You're listening to the news on RTHK.
Welcome back. This is Backchat on a Monday morning, first one of the week with Mike Rouse and me, Hugh Chiverton. We're talking about the PLA's role in Hong Kong. This is with controversy still over the whether the PLA could give up some land that we so badly need for development, as well as issues like the troops turning up in country parks to help clear up after the typhoon. Talk of uniformed soldiers appearing on our streets. That was floated over the summer. And also another issue is Chinese troops being moved to other Asian countries via Hong Kong, with military transport planes being used at Chek Lap Kok, possibly for the first time. So I guess Hong Kong kind of taking a strategic role, logistics of the region. We have with us now Lawrence Myers, a barrister, chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation, and we're also joined by political commentator Joseph Cheng. Our number once again is 233-88266, or you can email us backchat@rthk.hk with your questions and solution. And one more plug, tomorrow we have a special election forum. This is for the West Kowloon by-election, and candidates will be joining us for a special forum, as I say, tomorrow between 8:30 and 9:30. We're still looking at the moment for questions to put to them. If you've got anything that's on your mind that you'd like to put to those candidates, share them by emailing backchat@rthk.hk. Joseph Cheng, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Do you think attitudes are changing? There's a suggestion of a poll that maybe people are a little bit more willing now to, have the PLA have a little higher profile in Hong Kong. Do you think there's that feeling that kind of the worry that was there in 1997 has gone away a little bit?
Well, certainly there is more acceptance of the PLA in recent years compared with the situation in, say, 1997. We all remembered that on July the 1st, 1997, the PLA garrison entered Hong Kong around about 3 a.m. in the morning. So there was an awareness that Hong Kong people were concerned, and in fact a bit worried at that time about the presence of the PLA in the territory. That was exactly the rationale for the rather unusual low profile coming into Hong Kong around about 3 a.m. And of course, in the subsequent years, the PLA maintained its low profile, so much so that people more or less didn't even notice its presence. Then gradually, it offered activities like visits to the bases, like visits to Chinese military facilities and
visiting
observations
warships
of equipment and so on, So that improves the image.
Right. And encouraging the people to go aboard visiting warships.
Yes.
For example.
Yes, and certainly you see a segment of the population in the territory was very excited about these activities, and there were long queues for the limited tickets available. But this stepping up of the profile of the PLA in recent year or so is a worrying signal. I think it is also in line with the increasingly high profile of the party of the Communist Party of China in the territory. Probably the Chinese authorities in recent year or so believe that it is worthwhile to step up the profile of the party and the PLA in the territory to make people aware that the Chinese authorities are in control of Hong Kong, that the one country element is to be emphasized, the two systems element is to be de-emphasized, and so on. So if this is indeed the attitude of the Chinese authorities, then this is obviously a worrying trend.
At the human level, at the social level, do you think the soldiers should be allowed to move around freely in the community, socialize, maybe get a girlfriend or something?
Well, if they are out of uniform, I think this is only human. If the garrison, when they are out of uniform, when they are enjoying their free time, enjoying their holidays, naturally we expect them to enjoy their stay in Hong Kong, just like any other visitor to Hong Kong.
Right. One thing, as I understand it, one other concern was the pay, that their pay is extremely low compared to the average Hong Konger, and they could barely kind of get by. They couldn't buy drinks in bars or what have you, or things like that. And they might be exposed to temptation with all the money sloshing around outside the barracks. Is that a consideration, do you think?
This is apparently a consideration. I think those who are close to Chinese cadres visiting Hong Kong, there is a certain worry. In the first place, while they are in China, I guess people understand that they have all sorts of grey income, some of them in the area of subsidies from various authorities, in special privileges given to them by various corporations and so on. And certainly they find it easier to enjoy their leisure activities inside mainland China. But in Hong Kong, given the rather high cost of living and the tremendous care they have to adopt, they have to assume in conducting their monetary and financial transactions, that may create a bit of a problem. Yes.
Can you see there's a difference, if you like, between garrison duties per se and just normal interaction with the community?
Limited interaction with the community have so far been successful, as we have just mentioned. All these visits to warships, visits to military bases, and open day for school children, etc., tend to be very well received. And there is obviously a substantial segment of the population who would like to show their patriotism, their pride of China's achievements, and they do enjoy these activities. But at the same time, since we have to accept that Hong Kong society is quite polarized today, and there's another substantial segment of the population who do not want to see a stepped-up profile of the PLA in the territory in uniform.
Right. What do you think of the suggestion that Hong Kong young people should be allowed to become a fighter pilot or to join the Navy and go to sea on a warship? Do you think Hong Kong people should have that right?
I have no objections. I am sure there are young people in Hong Kong who would like to pursue such careers, including careers as civil servants in China, as diplomats serving the Chinese government, and so on, if opportunities are given to Hong Kong people without any ties attached, without making it compulsory for the entire population. I personally have no objection to these measures. And as I was saying, I certainly believe that a segment of the population will welcome such opportunities and privileges.
Right, so an opportunity, not an obligation.
Yes.
All right, isn't a couple of emails. First one from Gloria, and perhaps Lawrence Ma, you'd like to respond to this. Gloria says, apart from helping to clean up after the typhoon, it seems we do not need the PLA so much. While upholding the garrison law upon the handover, they may think of scaling down the size of the army stationed in Hong Kong. In any case, China can deploy some to Hong Kong anytime from Shenzhen if necessary. So land occupied by the PLA can be released for other use. I suppose you were saying kind of a similar thing, Lawrence Ma. You don't. A lot of warfare now would be done online, as it were.
Yeah, well, but still, I mean, the PLA has a political aspect of their existence. Now, if you look back why the PLA is actually in Hong Kong, it was said by Deng Xiaoping in 1984 to the just deceased Sir Zhong Xiyuan, which he said to Zhong Xiyuan that we shall station troops there to safeguard our national security. Now, because that is a gesture, that is an appearance, that is a symbol that Hong Kong is part of China, that's governed by China, and Hong Kong is protected by China. Now, if you say it is not necessary, I think that's beyond discussion, because our system, particularly with the basic law in place for 20-odd years, the garrison law in place for 20-odd years, it is now beyond discussions as to whether we should have the PLA in Hong Kong.
All right, come on.
Well, we remember on the same occasion, actually, Deng Xiaoping came out and openly rebuked the Chinese foreign minister and the Chinese defense minister then, who promised Hong Kong people that PLA soldiers would not be stationed in Hong Kong. So apparently, there were some discussions and even some arguments within the Chinese authorities. I do understand that in the eyes of the Chinese leadership, the garrison is also a symbol of the exercise of Chinese sovereignty over Hong Kong, and by now I do believe that few people in Hong Kong would object to it. But the point also remains, as raised just by the listener, do we need a very substantial presence of the PLA in Hong Kong? Does the PLA garrison need to occupy all those precious pieces of land in the urban areas? A symbolic garrison is one thing, but the occupation of precious land, the gradual stepping up of the profile is another.
All right, some more comments. Colin says, yes, it would be good to see the Chinese troops in Hong Kong taking part in local sports competitions. In the past, the PLA have had teams in trail walkers. Yes, it was great to see the PLA out there helping to clear up the country parks. What about Hong Kong setting up its own defence force? Up to 1997, there was the Hong Kong Military Service Corps. Hong Kong have their own police force. Singapore has a good defence force model. That comes from Colin. Lawrence Ma, presumably that wouldn't be acceptable, would it, for Hong Kong to have its own?
Well, not under the law. I mean, you can't. You've got to repeal the garrison law. You've got to repeal the basic law with respect to that provision on defence. I don't think this is beyond discussion.
Okay. All right. Peter says the PLA hold numerous sites, some in prime locations around Hong Kong, some very large, many of which are hardly being used. As has already been said, there should be discussion on returning some of these for use of Hong Kong's needs. As regards the PLA taking a higher profile, in the present climate, this would obviously be a cause of concern for many, and it's reasonable for people to ask at whose behest soldiers helped clear up after the recent typhoon. Without greater transparency about their role and how they operate here, as well as proper public discussion of any changes, it would not make sense to talk about their taking a higher profile. That comes from Peter. Lawrence Moore, those military transport planes coming into Hong Kong kind of opens up another possibility that Hong Kong would have a part to play if there was, say, conflict related to the South China Sea or something like that, whether it was moving material or as a base or whatever. Obviously, we're in close proximity to the South China Sea. How would you feel about that if the Hong Kong garrison was basically being used as part of a military conflict or associated with military conflict in the South China Sea? Would that be appropriate? Would you feel uncomfortable about that? If they were fighting Americans, that would be a little bit awkward, would it?
Well, I mean, I don't know whether you want me to comment on the part about transportation, because that's part of a military assistance between the departments of the soldiers. But we won't be focusing too much on, although we are pretty close to the South China Sea. But I think Chinese troops, particularly the Navy, has their establishment in the South China Sea. And we are not the closest proximity to the South China Sea vis-a-vis the Hainan province.
Yes, they run out of Hainan, aren't they? That's the headquarters for that military district.
That's true. And also in the islands that the Hong Kong, the Chinese government claims sovereignty on, there were also troops there, I think.
Mm-hmm. And presumably the military planes that were being talked about, that were servicing Djibouti, the base in Africa?
No, I think they're Asia. They were Southeast Asia.
There are lots of Chinese troops in Southeast Asia?
I think increasingly there are, and they do exercises and things like that, and there are actually, Chinese troops spreading around the world in sort of larger roles.
United Nations roles, maybe?
That's
exactly,
right,
yeah, that's right.
United Nations calling the support of the Chinese military, also with other militaries of other countries for cooperative actions.
Yeah. Joseph Cheng, what about the issue of the PLA land? Would the Hong Kong government ever stick its neck out and approach, do you think, the PLA and say, can we have some of our land back?
I believe we have to accept that the land is now PLA property. But theoretically, if the Hong Kong government is willing to purchase the land from the PLA, I do believe that this is a legitimate discussion, a legitimate economic deal, so to speak, because arguably the PLA intends to serve as a symbol of the exercise of Chinese sovereignty over the territory. We all understand that the real presence, the real duties of the PLA in Hong Kong, hopefully, will remain quite unnecessary. And so if the land in the significant urban areas, prestigious urban areas, are available for sale back to the government, and then, of course, open to auction, I do believe this is a good arrangement.
I don't think it could work like that, could it? I mean,
the
land of Hong Kong belongs to the state, and the Central People's Government has delegated to the Hong Kong SAR government the right to manage that property. The military land doesn't belong to the PLA. It is just they're occupying. They're allowed to occupy it for legitimate military purposes.
But the PLA does have the use of the land.
Right, but they can give it. If they don't need it for a military purpose, they should just give it back.
Yes, just like most people, most landowners in Hong Kong own the use of the land for several years, for a number of years. I do believe some compensation. I personally believe that some compensation is reasonable to persuade the PLA to give up the use of these pieces of land, especially those in the urban areas.
I think yes. If they wanted to keep that facility in use somewhere within Hong Kong, but they were prepared to give up a piece of land in a prominent site, then I think we could compensate them somewhere else with giving them a replacement facility, but not just paying them to move off a piece of land they don't need. I can't see that getting very far through the Finance Committee.
Okay.
Well, I don't have strong views on this. I think this is up to discussion. But as I was saying, I remain personally willing, as a citizen of Hong Kong, to accept financial compensation for the release of the land by the PLA back to the Hong Kong government for auction for the use of the community.
Okay, one more question from Colin, who says, does the Hong Kong government contribute towards their cost?
No.
No. It's completely borne by the PLA, Colin, for your information. In the meantime, thank you very much indeed to political commentator Joseph Cheng and to Lawrence Ma, barrister, chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation. Earlier we were speaking also to Peter Wong, NPC delegate, and Stephen Kwok, chairman of the Labour Party. Thanks very much indeed for joining us today.